Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this Tuesday, August 27, 2019 day. I am your host, Nick Pitts. You've got me again. You had me yesterday, and you put up with me all day yesterday.
Double duty.
I know. And they've got to put up with me today. But there is a respite for hope in the midst of the obliviousness and trying to wade your way through corny jokes and bad takes that is Nick Pitts. I am joined by the one and only from Huco Action.
There you go.
Was
You
that
got
not
it.
smooth?
You got it so
Chelsey
smooth
Youman
this time.
is here with me today.
Hi,
Chelsey,
guys.
how are you?
I'm good. How
So
are you
good.
doing?
So good. So Chelsey, for those of you that aren't watching right now on the Facebooks, so Chelsey, and you can watch on Facebook at Point of View, or actually facebook.com/Point of View Radio. Chelsey is got mac and cheese right in front of me right now.
It is just what the doctor ordered. It's always a good idea.
I don't know if mac and cheese is ever a bad idea.
You have our first article today.
No. So she has got the new Chick-fil-A mac and cheese, and just as proven to be the case that I don't think there is such a thing as something bad from Chick-fil-A.
It proved they can do it all, guys.
Yeah. I mean, even like
maybe
from
not burgers, but
from a sauce perspective, I guess they can do burgers, but then again, like I'm going through this thing where I'm not eating red meat right now. Well, I'm not not eating red meat. It's
I feel like you just told me you're a vegan. This changes everything, Nick.
No, like red meat like just doesn't sit well in my stomach right now. So like I'm just kind of pulling back from red
Honestly,
meat.
a steak a day.
Oh, I love a good steak. Don't get me wrong. I still, if there's steak available, if I'm feeling steak or steak is served to me, I'm not turning it down, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm not gravitating towards red meat as much as I used to.
God, well, you need to come to my house because my husband is such a good cook.
Is he really?
He's like chef status cook.
Okay.
He makes better steak than I've ever had at any restaurant.
Wow.
So we'll have you over.
Okay, deal.
You can taste test Daniel's steak.
Okay, deal. And then hopefully I can dance with Crawford.
We'll get you over this hump you're in.
But we'll, nevertheless, thank you so much for joining us today. We have got quite a show for you. We're going to be talking a little bit. There was a fascinating article in the Gospel Coalition about the kind of the effects that pornography is having on the human condition. And so we will touch on that. We'll touch on I'll go ahead and tell you all, I am incensed would probably be the kind of a light-handed way to be able to say it. I have been frustrated to the nth degree over a Wall Street Journal, NBC News poll that came out that indicated that millennials' values are shifting from where they were 20 years ago. So obviously millennials were very young 20 years ago, but that age demographic during that time. This Wall Street Journal, NBC News article indicates that there's been this shift in millennials no longer valuing having children, patriotism, and religion. And the reason why I'm so incensed is because, as is often the case, I've been watching TV. And by watching TV, I mean I've watched maybe like 5 or 6 minutes of some clips. And I think everyone that I've heard I respect immensely, but I think they've completely missed the boat on this. And it's frustrating for me to an nth degree, is because I just think from the conservative perspective, but also from the Christian perspective, I think it's endemic, whether they realize it or not. The reason why that we have this issue that we're having today about the shifting of the values is because they themselves have missed one of the main primary problems that we do find. And so you're probably wondering, why am I talking around the issue and not necessarily addressing the issue? Is because I want you to stick around for the second hour when we're going to be talking about that. Oh, was that good? Was that a good tease? Was that a good? I feel really good. And then we'll also be talking about some evangelical support for President Trump. If you were listening to us yesterday, you know that we interviewed Jonathan Merritt, and I would highly recommend you go back and listen to that. We've seen Democrats are starting to hire certain Democratic candidates like Pete Buttigieg and Senator Cory Booker, starting to hire faith outreach directors onto their campaign. And there's some numbers that indicate that white evangelicals are not as prone or not as ready to vote again or vote for the first time for President Trump. And so we'll look at some of that evangelical support. And then churches are turning into carnivals, which is a fascinating article that we found at NBC News that points to this reality that there's just a multitude of church buildings that are going up for sale now. And what is that What does that reveal about the culture? Why is that happening? We'll take a little bit of a look at that and more. But here during the first segment, what I want to do is I want us to talk a little bit about this thing that's happened out at the New York Times. And so over the weekend, the New York Times published an article that indicated that, lo and behold, that they had found in their investigative reporting that there were right-leaning and more conservative outlets that were allied with the president were beginning to snoop through old words that had been written by certain major media outlets, as well as old tweets that were put out by some of the reporters and editors at some of those mainstream media outlets. And they reported it, and what they found is that they were saying that they were saying that there's a hit job that's after them. They're putting up a ploy, and essentially what they were assuming was that they were above board, that they were allowed to say these certain things and not necessarily be hit by them. And so there's a fascinating National Review article that we've got on our website that we'll be touching on. And you know, Chelsey, this is your glee. It's like
I just love these types of topics because there's a lot of ways to look at the issue and anything that's really freedom of speech related. I just love those issues.
So it's almost as if, and so we'll touch on this after the break because we're going to have to get back to it. We're going to have to take a break here shortly. But what's fascinating is that if you remember the context and you've been paying attention for a little bit or have caught some of the news as of late, it seems as though there's always this rash overreaction when an individual on the right has tweeted something problematic in the past, whether it's 5, 10, 15 years ago, and it's always a call for off with their head, out with their job, etc. But now that the tables have turned, it seems as though they're less reticent. They're more reticent to want to say off with their heads. They have to be fired.
And shocking twist.
And there's almost like a double standard, which just seems, which is just a little fascinating twist. And so the question that I'm going to be wondering, there's a multitude of ways that we can address this, but one of the things that I'm going to be wondering when we address this after the break is this a good thing? Because just to be completely honest with you, I don't like the idea of digging up old tweets in social media from the past, from 5-10 years ago. I think what many of us, I think it's one thing to see a recurring theme happen on someone's Twitter feed. It's another thing for them to make a bad joke. And I don't like this turn that has become, that the right now has decided it's a tactic they're going to utilize. But we're going to talk about it a little bit. And so we'll dig a little bit deeper into that. But first, we're going to have to take a break. But one of the things I do want to encourage you to do is, one, I want you to go to the website at www.pointofview.net. And when you're at the website, you can find that article, which is the New York Times Should Stop Whining is what it's under. And you can read that article. Or you can also go to our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Be sure to leave a question or comment if you'd like, and like the page, because we like you and we hope that you will like us. Even though it's not reciprocal in nature, we'll still like you even if you don't like us. But we got to go to a break, but we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, if you ever wonder about the impact a Supreme Court decision on religious liberty can have, you need look no further than Lehigh County, Pennsylvania. The county seal has a number of symbols surrounding the county courthouse. There is a heart, a cow, a grain silo, a factory, and a cross. Well, the Freedom from Religion Foundation had a problem with the cross on the seal and took them to court. A federal district court judge ruled that the county seal was unconstitutional as an establishment of religion based upon what is called the Lemon Test. Back in 1971, in a case of Lemon versus Kurtzman, the justices established a three-pronged test. They needed to have a secular purpose. The act should neither advance nor inhibit religion, and there should be no excessive government entanglement. The judge therefore ruled that the county seal failed to pass the Lemon Test. There is where the latest Supreme Court case comes into play. The justices ruled that the Peace Cross in Bladensburg, Maryland, was constitutional and did not have to be torn down. Moreover, 5 of the Supreme Court justices agreed that the Lemon Test no longer applied to monuments, symbols, mottos, displays, and ceremonies. Well, it didn't take long for this precedent to be applied. The decision concerning the Lehigh County seal was on hold at the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. Judge Thomas Hardiman cited the Supreme Court decision and ruled that the seal of Lehigh County is constitutional and can remain. It's worth mentioning that Thomas Hardiman has been on President Trump's short list of potential Supreme Court nominees. Two judges that were on that list, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, now sit on the Supreme Court, and so we may hear more from Judge Hardiman in the future. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Affirm Films and the Kendrick Brothers, Overcomer, starring Alex Kendrick and Priscilla Shire, rated PG, now playing in theaters. Overcomermovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, on this day that we celebrate Lyndon B. Johnson's birthday.
Oh,
maybe for our Texas audience. Are you familiar as much with Lyndon B. Johnson?
LBJ, yes.
Yeah. I think I've got some crazy anecdotes that I've heard from him heard about him over the years in some of the books. So for our audience, there's a lot of ways to be able to identify me as a nerd, but one of the ways is my bucket list item includes wanting to read a biography on every president in the U.S.
Ooh,
and so,
did you read Decision Points?
Of course, got to read Decision Points. And so so LBJ, I've read a couple on him because he is quite literally just this larger